What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we're talking about the Frontiersman build. So this is a great setup that's going to help you get started in New World. It focuses on DPS, mobility, and dealing large amounts of damage through opening strikes. Basically, by the time enemies get to you, they either would be dead or they shouldn't have too much health left, and you can easily clean them up. Then from a PvP perspective, this build is one that will excel at medium to long range, but still has enough firepower to be effective at close range if needed. Now, as many of you know, mileage will vary with some of these depending on the gear you find, what perks roll on weapons, but overall, this build has been very strong throughout early, mid, and late game. So with this setup, you will be able to clean up regular enemies and elites easily without them getting close to you. You can also use this build to farm certain bosses without much trouble. So let's go ahead and get into the build and start talking about what makes up the Frontiersman. So the Frontiersman focuses on the hatchet and the bow as your primary weapons. Now, if you absolutely hate the bow, you can sub it out for a musket, but just know you will struggle early on finding ammo. So I would recommend that you make that switch later once ammo is easier to come by. So this build does take advantage of the flexibility of the hatchet and its high damage in close quarters. Plus, the hatchet's utility is incredibly powerful. I mean, for leveling, it's just insane, and it keeps you prepared for most situations. So looking at the skill tree, we are keeping things pretty simple for the hatchet. We're going to start by taking Berserk to pick up a nice 20% damage buff. Then we're going to pick up Accumulated Power, which gives us another damage buff when we land 3 light attacks on the same target. After that, we will continue down the chain by taking On the Hunt for a movement speed increase while in Berserk. This is great for both attacking and leveling. Then we're going to grab Raging Torrent for an extra damage skill. Next, we're going to pick up Berserking Refresh for a great self-heal when you activate Berserk and throughout Berserk. Then we're going to take Rending Throw for a little bit of ranged filler, just in case an enemy isn't quite in melee range yet. Then we're going to head back to the Berserker tree to pick up Against All Odds, Fortifying Strikes, Aggressive Approach, and then Final Blow. Now lastly, we're going to pick up Berserking Purge, Uninterruptible Berserk, Frenzied Purge, Defy Death, and then back around to the throwing tree, and then grab all of the nodes linked to Rending Throw, and then Refreshing Throws and Exploitation. Plus, at the very end, like we mentioned, we do take that Defy Death for a Get Out of Jail Free card to help with any sticky situations. So all in all, this hatchet configuration will give us an awesome lineup of passives that are going to increase our damage, our movement speed, our survivability, and give us some nice self-healing. So let's move over and talk about the bow. So the bow complements the hatchet and is going to be used for all of your opening attacks. And with the nodes that we've taken, most things should either die in 2 shots or be very, very close to death. So the whole focus of the bow in this situation is to deal as much damage as possible on the opening attack and follow-up attack, because our goal is to never even pull out the hatchet. Things should just die that quickly. So let's break down the bow skill tree, starting with the hunter side. So the first thing we're going to take is Penetrating Shot. This gives us a very quick skill that can be used immediately following our opening shot, and this makes for a great 1-2 punch. Now this skill also pierces targets, so you need to keep that in mind to avoid aggroing extra enemies, but it also is nice for breaking blocks or barriers that those tank NPCs will put up. Next, we're going to take Aim True and Long Range. Now, both of these will increase our damage. Aim True is going to give us a 30% damage buff to heavy drawn arrows, and Long Range will increase our damage by 20% to foes at least 10 meters away. And this makes for a big damage increase to our opening shot. Next, we're going to pick up the 2 nodes connected to Penetrating Shot, which are called Blood-Soaked Arrow and Deep Strike. Now, both of these will increase the damage to our primary and pierced targets. Next, we need to move in to grab our Opening Strike node that will give us another 20% damage increase to our heavy attacks against enemies with 100% health. Then grab up Rapid Shot for a damage skill to help clean up enemies if they run up to you too fast. Now, this is not going to be a primary damage skill. We don't need to use this thing off of cooldown. Instead, we need to use it when you're fighting fast enemies who are going to eat all 3 shots, because you don't get to aim these. They basically just shoot out kind of like a shotgun blast. So you need to make sure they will eat all 3, or at the very least, the 3rd shot, which has the most damage behind it. Otherwise, go ahead and flip over to your Hatchet. Now, after you grab Rapid Shot, pick up the 2 passive nodes on the next tier, which are called Surprise Attack and Arrow Range. Now, Surprise Attack is going to deal another 20% damage to enemies for our opening strike, and the Arrow Range is going to let our arrows fly a bit further before they start to drop, giving us a little bit more accuracy. Now, on to our next point, we do need to flip over to the Skirmisher tree and pick up Catch Me If You Can for some extra escape potential. This node will give you a 20% movement speed buff if you have 3 or more enemies near you. Next up, pick up the Impale node on the Skirmisher tree. This is going to cause your opening shots to apply a slow debuff to enemies, making them susceptible to even more follow-up shots. Then we're going to grab Poison Arrow for some nice AoE, and then head back over to the Hunter tree to pick up the 2 connecting nodes to Rapid Shot, Rapid Accuracy, and Final Blow. Now, Rapid Accuracy will have a chance to reset the cooldown of the skill, and then Final Blow causes the last shot of the skill to deal 25% extra damage. So at this point, you should have enough to pick up Concussion. This will increase your headshot damage and give you a chance to get your arrow back. This one is incredibly important. So our final points should go into the Skirmisher tree to pick up Infected Arrows, Direct Hit, Mark, and Battle Precision. In no particular order, pick these up as you see fit. So at the end of the day, our first bow shot, right? When you open up combat and you want to hit an enemy with your first ever arrow, it gets a damage increase of 110% just from these passives. That isn't including any outside factors. And I've been able to regularly clip enemies for 11,000 plus damage, no sweat. So being able to dish out tons of damage isn't necessarily a problem. So that covers skills. Let's talk about gear and gems. So early on, gearing is incredibly simple. You just need to look out for things that are, quote, of the Cavalier or of the Brigand. These will give us a boost to Dexterity, which is our main stat, and then a side boost to either Constitution or Strength. So Constitution is going to give you more health, so go that direction if you want to be a little bit more tanky. Strength is the primary scaling stat for Hatchet, so take that if you want more Hatchet damage. But there are a couple things to keep in mind. Make sure you keep your armor weight to light or medium. That way you can get that extra damage boost and maintain your dodge roll. If you do drift into the heavy armor territory, you won't be as effective, but your CCs will last longer. So I would highly recommend avoiding that, but if that's a playstyle you want to go for it. So for weapons overall, look for things that increase your dexterity, but also keep an eye out for some special perks, things like Refreshing Torrent, which causes each hit of Raging Torrent to reduce your Hatchet cooldowns. Keen Berserk, this increases your critical hit chance while under a certain health percentage during Berserk. Then we have Refreshing Penetrating Shot. This reduces the cooldown for Penetrating Shot when you kill something with the skill. We have Empowered. This causes Empowered to last longer, which means you deal increased damage for a longer period of time. And then we have Leeching, where you gain a percentage of your damage back as health. So from a gems perspective, it's pretty straightforward as well. Early on, lots of enemies deal slashing damage. You can slot in like a slash ward or a physical ward on your armor to protect against that. I would also recommend slotting in a nature ward gem to protect against disease and poison damage that undead and drowned deal in early game. But with that being said, I would also recommend do not slot gems into gear early on, because you will be flipping through gear so fast, you won't get to enjoy that gem that you just put in there. You put it into a chest piece. Next thing you know, a level later, you have a brand new chest piece, and then that gem is completely wasted and gone. So don't put anything in early game, save those for later game, but if you feel so inclined, put those ones in. Now, from a weapon perspective, we do need to put a brash gem in your bow. This gives a massive 30% damage increase to enemies with full health, which plays perfectly into our opening shot playstyle. Then we have for Hatchet, we're going to take an opportunistic gem. This is going to give us a 20% damage increase to any enemy with 30% or less health. Again, this should play perfectly into our build because the hatchet will not be used unless enemies get close to us. And if they get close to us, they should definitely be under 30% health with all of the damage that we're dealing with our bow. But again, these two gems, I would not recommend putting them in until you hit at least level 35-ish, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. So you don't want to waste those gems because, again, they can be very expensive, hard to come by, all of that. So if you want to put them in, those are the ones I would recommend. So last up, let's go ahead and talk about attributes. So we're going to go full dexterity all the way to the very end. We want a chance at ammo being returned and guaranteed crits after dodging. Then you want to put 75 points into constitution and then the rest into strength for added hatchet damage. So the way I would do this leveling up is I would put 2 points into dex, 1 point into constitution, 2 point into dex, 1 point into constitution until you hit 50 constitution. And then at that point you can put everything into dex until you get to 300 and then start putting some points into constitution and strength. You can follow the same 2 constitution, 1 strength until you hit 75 const. So that's really what I would go for. Now, again, this is up for interpretation. If you feel like you're dying too often or you don't have enough health, then notch that down a little bit. Do 2 points in the constitution, 1 point into dexterity. It's all up to you guys. This build is purely guidelines, not rules, and it's just something that I have used to level up a character from 1 to 60, and it worked out extremely well. So I just want to share that with everybody. So overall, I mean, this build has been fantastic for just about any situation. It's not overly tanky, but it does have a great rogue playstyle that rewards dodging, ambushing enemies, and playing really fast. I'm really excited to take something like this and apply it once we get access to daggers. So if this build sounds like you, I would really urge you to give the Frontiersman a shot. It's a fun build, and you get to dish out tons of damage. So guys, let me know in the comment section below if you've played something like this and what changes that you would make. Thank you everyone so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.